At 18, her stepmother traded her to the crippled vampire king, just to spare my stepsister's fate. Ilara had always known the walls of her home were cold, but never this cold. Even the hearth's flame seemed hesitant, as if it could not bring warmth to the house her stepmother ruled with quiet cruelty. At 18, she had spent half her life learning to keep her thoughts hidden, to smile when she must, and to obey when silence was safer than words. Yet that morning, silence could not protect her. Her stepmother entered the small chamber where she had been arranging flowers in a cracked vase. The woman's eyes were sharp, calculating, and in them there was a finality Ilara had never seen before. "You will leave today," her stepmother said, her voice soft but unwavering. "It is the only way to protect your stepsister." Ilara blinked, unsure she had heard correctly. "Leave? Where?" "To the king," her stepmother replied, as if naming some ordinary neighbor. "The crippled vampire king. He has interest in your bloodline. You are to go with the escort I have prepared." Ilara's stomach turned. The legends of the vampire King Kale had haunted her since childhood, an immortal whose power had shaped the very land, whose throne was as dark as the mist-shrouded mountains. Some said he had been crippled for a betrayal long ago, cursed to walk on a leg that refused to heal, his heart hardened by centuries of anger. "And my stepsister?" she asked, voice trembling. "You have already seen her fate in your own reflection." "Do not ask me to undo what cannot be undone," her stepmother said, turning sharply. She left the room, the click of her heels echoing like a sentence being passed. Ilara sank to the floor, the vase slipping from her hands and shattering. Water and petals mixed with the cracked porcelain, a quiet symbol of her shattered world. When the escort arrived, cloaked and silent, she had no choice but to follow. They rode through forests where the trees arched like giant fingers and the fog pressed close, damp and cold. Strange whispers drifted on the wind, carrying words she could not understand. A wolf howled somewhere far off, though no wolves had lived in these forests for decades. The road twisted and climbed, the sun swallowed by the mountains until only pale moonlight lit their way. By the time the castle rose before her, Ilara felt as though she had traveled through a dream. Its black towers pierced the clouds, jagged and uneven, as if carved by hands that no longer existed. The walls shimmered with frost, and shadows seemed to move independently of their sources. She shivered, not from the cold but from the sense that the castle itself was alive, and it had been waiting for her. At the gates, the guards made no move to speak. One stepped forward, silent, and led her inside. The hall stretched like a cavern, the floor polished so that her reflection stared back at her with wide, startled eyes. Torches along the walls cast flickering light, creating shadows that danced and shifted. The air smelled of incense, iron, and something older, something she could not name. Then she saw him. Kale sat at the end of the hall, his throne carved of black stone and engraved with symbols that glowed faintly in the torchlight. His leg rested on a silver support, bent at an angle that spoke of old pain and restraint. But it was his eyes that held her, eyes like polished onyx, deep and cold yet strangely full of curiosity. The room seemed to shrink around him. Even the torches flickered differently near his presence. "You are late," he said, his voice low and smooth, carrying an authority that made her knees weak. I did not," she began, but the escort stepped forward. "Your Highness, she has come as ordered." Kale raised a hand, stopping them. He studied Ilara with a gaze that seemed to strip her bare, reading her thoughts, her fears, and, unexpectedly, her strength. "No," he said finally, "leave us." Alone with him, she felt the weight of the castle pressing down, the distant echoes of centuries of rulers who had come and gone. Yet there was something else, something like recognition. "You are Ilara," he said, as if testing the name on his tongue. "I know why you were brought here, and I know what your stepmother wished to hide." Ilara's throat went dry. She had expected fear but not the certainty in his voice. Why me?" she whispered. Because you are not ordinary, he replied, leaning forward slightly. Your bloodline, it carries power even I have not seen in generations. And yet I feel your fear. You do not trust me, she shook her head. I should not. A faint smile touched his lips, barely noticeable. No, you should not. Trust is earned, not given. But you will learn that even I have my own chains. For hours he asked her questions, not about trivial matters but about her thoughts, her dreams, and the pain she carried. He tested her mind, her spirit, and even her courage. Each answer she gave seemed to intrigue him further, even as she realized the game he played was dangerous. To impress him could bring danger. To resist could bring disaster. Later she was shown her chambers, a small room high in the castle, with a window that overlooked the mist-covered forest. She tried to sleep, but her mind raced. Every shadow seemed to hide eyes, every wind whisper spoke of secrets she could not yet understand. And then, as if drawn by her unrest, a soft knock came at the door. It was Cale. He did not enter fully, only enough for the torchlight to illuminate his face. You cannot imagine how long I have waited for someone like you, he said. His voice was softer now, almost human. And yet the blood of your family carries the sins of the past. Do you understand what that means? I do not, she admitted. It means that nothing here is simple, that every choice you make will have consequences far beyond what you can see. And yet, he paused, letting the words hang. I believe you may be strong enough to survive it, strong enough to change it. Alara felt a strange pull toward him, a mix of fear, fascination, and something else she could not name. His presence was magnetic yet intimidating. His words were a puzzle, each one heavy with meaning. Before she could answer, the door clicked shut. She sank to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees. The room was quiet again, but the weight of the castle, the knowledge of Cale's gaze, and the thought of her stepmother's betrayal made her chest tighten. The next morning, she was summoned to the throne hall. Cale had arranged a private audience with the court, a display of power and respect that made the air itself seem heavy. As she entered, she noticed the portrait on the far wall, her stepmother, smiling politely, in a painting that seemed far too intimate for comfort. Her stomach churned. Cale gestured to the portrait. Do you recognize her? Alara nodded, her lips tight. She thought she could save herself by trading you. She underestimated the consequences, and she underestimated me. You are here not by chance but by fate. And fate, he said, his eyes locking onto hers, has a way of demanding what is owed. A chill ran down her spine. She realized with sudden clarity that the castle was not merely a home for the undead. It was a web of history, power, and unfinished business. And she had stepped directly into its center. Cale rose from his throne, moving with careful, deliberate steps. His leg betrayed him slightly, but it did not diminish his presence. He came close to her, and she could feel the intensity of his gaze, as if he could see every thought, every fear, every hidden strength. You will learn quickly, he said, and you will see that in my world nothing is as it seems. I do not promise comfort and I do not promise safety, but I do promise this. He paused, tilting his head, a shadow of something older flickering across his expression. I know your name, and I know your fate. Alara's heart thumped loudly in her chest. She wanted to retreat, to deny, to run, but she could not. The words had a strange power, binding her even as she resisted. She had entered the castle as a pawn, but already she sensed that she might become something far more dangerous, a force that could rival the king himself. Outside, the mist swirled, the forest whispered, and the castle seemed to breathe. Inside, two souls, marked by history and fate, stared at each other across a hall that had seen centuries pass, knowing that the first day of many had already begun. And somewhere deep in the shadows, a secret stirred, one that would not rest until it had claimed them both. The king knew her name and her fate. And so her story had truly begun. The castle had grown quieter since Alara's arrival, but the silence was heavy, like a living thing pressing against her chest. Days passed, and the routine of the court began to settle around her. Though settle was far too gentle a word for the strange rhythm of Kale's world. Every footstep echoed in the halls, every shadow seemed to watch, and every whisper of the wind carried the weight of unspoken history. Alara moved through the corridors with care, her steps soft but alert. She was learning quickly. The vampires of Kale's court were elegant and poised, yet their eyes held something distant, something sharp that measured her constantly. The servants bowed silently, their movements precise and almost ritualistic. And yet she could feel Kale's presence even when he was not near. It was as if the castle itself remembered him, and through its stone and shadow, he could sense everything that happened within. The first few nights were the hardest. Alara lay in her high chamber, staring at the ceiling as the moonlight cast silver patterns on the floor. She could hear faint murmurs outside her door, voices speaking in a language older than any she had learned. At first, fear gripped her, but gradually, curiosity took its place. She realized that this castle was alive in ways she could not yet understand. Kale did not visit her every night, but when he did, the air seemed to shift. One evening he appeared quietly at her doorway, holding a small candle that flickered like a distant star. "Do you sleep well?" he asked, his voice soft, almost thoughtful. "I try," she said honestly. "It is not easy here." "No," he agreed, stepping closer, the shadows around him bending with his movement. "It is not meant to be easy. Nothing in this place is. But hardship is a teacher, and you have lessons to learn." Alara noticed the slight limp in his step, the careful way he moved. Yet the way he carried himself, strong, deliberate, unyielding, made the castle seem smaller, less imposing. Even crippled, Kale's presence dominated every corner. "What kind of lessons?" she asked, curiosity overriding fear. "Control, patience, power," he said. His gaze lingered on her, sharp and piercing. "And trust, a dangerous lesson for many." Alara swallowed hard. She knew she would never fully trust him, not yet. And yet, each time he spoke, each glance he gave, she felt herself drawn closer to a truth she could not name, a truth about herself, about him, and about the forces that tied them together. The next day, Kale brought her to the training hall, a vast room lined with mirrors and runes etched into the floor. "You will begin with control," he said, handing her a thin rod of silver, engraved with symbols she did not recognize. "Your bloodline carries a rare gift. It is time you learn to use it. If you cannot master yourself, you cannot master power." Alara took the rod, feeling a faint warmth pulse through her fingers. She focused, following Kale's instructions, and slowly, hesitantly, a tiny spark of energy flickered from the tip. The air around her shimmered. "You feel it," Kale said, watching intently. "That is the beginning, but it is only the first step. Your power is tied to me, whether you know it or not. The curse I carry, it stirs when your blood is near." Alara's heart skipped. "A curse?" He nodded, walking slowly around her. "I have been bound for centuries. A betrayal, a spell, and a wound that never healed. I walk crippled not because my body is weak, but because the magic lingers in me. And now, your presence awakens it." For the first time, Alara realized the depth of what her stepmother had done. She had been sent here not merely as a pawn, but as a key to a centuries-old curse that had shaped Kale's very life. "Am I the only one who can help?" she asked, fear and awe mixing in her voice. Kale paused, leaning against the edge of the training floor. "You are not the only one who can touch the curse, but you are the one who can change it. Whether it is for better or worse, that depends on you." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Alara felt a mix of fear and responsibility. The fate of Kale, the castle, and perhaps even her stepsister now rested partly in her hands. Over the next few days, Kale taught her not only to control her emerging powers, but also to read the subtleties of the court. The vampires watched her closely, testing her reactions, seeing whether she would bend or break. She learned the language of gestures, the meaning in a glance, the weight of a pause. All the while, Kale remained nearby, guiding her, challenging her, yet never forcing her hand. One evening, she was practicing in the moonlit garden when Kale approached silently. He watched her for a long moment before speaking. "You have strength," he said quietly, "more than I expected, and yet you are afraid." Alara lowered her hands, frustrated. "I am not afraid," she said quickly. "You are," he replied gently. "Fear is not weakness, but it is honesty. Do not hide it from me. It will only grow stronger if denied." She looked at him, noticing for the first time the fine lines around his eyes, the small scars etched across his hands, the way his gaze softened briefly before hardening again. He was more than the legends, more than the terrifying stories whispered in villages. He was human in ways the world would not admit. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. The wind rustled the leaves around them, carrying with it a faint whisper that seemed almost like a warning. "You are here because of betrayal," Kale said at last, his voice steady but low. "And yet there is something in you that draws me, something I cannot name, yet I feel it as clearly as the moonlight." Alara's breath caught. She did not understand, and she wanted to deny the stir of emotion that rose within her. But it was undeniable. The pull she felt toward him was as real as the frost on the garden stones, as real as the echo of her own heartbeat. Before she could speak, a servant arrived, bowing low. "Your Highness, news from the North Wing, your attention is requested." Kale's gaze lingered on Alara a moment longer. "Stay," he said softly. "Do not leave." The servant hesitated, then bowed again and left. Alone again, Kale stepped closer. "There are forces here that do not welcome your presence," he said quietly. "The curse stirs not only in me but around us. Your stepsister, your stepmother, they are more entangled in this than you know. And you, Alara, are the key that might untangle it or bind it further." Alara felt a shiver, part fear, part anticipation. Her stepsister was ill, the result of some hidden curse that had begun long ago. And her stepmother had sacrificed her to this place, to this man, to this fate. Anger flared within her, but so did a strange determination. She would not be a pawn, not now, not ever. Kale studied her, the faintest smile touching his lips. "I see it in you," he said. "You will not submit easily. That is promising." Days passed, blending into nights, each moment heavy with training, whispered conversations, and quiet observations. Alara's connection to Kale deepened, not in ways she could define, but in ways she could feel. She sensed the weight of his history, the sorrow behind his commanding gaze, and the loneliness that must have come from centuries of isolation. One night, during a ritual to test her control of the emerging magic in her bloodline, her energy flared unexpectedly. The runes on the floor glowed, the air hummed, and for a moment the castle itself seemed to lean closer, as if curious about what was happening. Kale's hand brushed against hers as he guided her, and a jolt of power, electric and unfamiliar, passed between them. Alara stumbled back, heart racing. I did not mean," Kale caught her, steadying her with a gentleness that startled her. "It was not an accident," he said quietly. "It was inevitable." The words left her breathless. The connection between them was undeniable, yet terrifying. She understood, perhaps for the first time, that her presence in the castle was not merely an event. It was a force shaping Kale, the curse, and perhaps herself. Later, alone in her chamber, Alara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the rhythm of her pulse. The castle's shadows seemed to hum around her, whispering of destiny, of power, of danger. And through it all, one thought would not leave her mind. She was no longer just Alara, the girl betrayed by her stepmother. She was Alara, the key, the spark, the one who could change a curse centuries old. And with that realization came both fear and a strange, unnameable longing. Because in the depths of the castle, in the presence of the crippled vampire king, she had glimpsed something more than danger. She had glimpsed possibility. Outside, the moonlight glimmered across the mist. And in the heart of the throne, Kale watched, knowing that the future, bright, dark, or uncertain, was already beginning to take shape around them both. The curse was awakening, and Alara was at its center. The castle was quiet at dawn, the fog outside curling around the towers like restless spirits. Inside, the shadows felt heavier than usual, carrying whispers of old secrets that no one had spoken aloud for centuries. Alara walked through the hallways, her fingers brushing the carved stone walls, feeling the pulse of the castle beneath her touch. Every step seemed to echo not just through the stone, but through time itself. Kale waited for her in the training hall as he always did in the mornings, but today the air between them was different. His presence was more commanding, yet softer, as if he carried the weight of something unspoken. "Alara," he said, voice low, "you have grown stronger. But strength alone is not enough." She nodded, trying to steady the rising tension in her chest. "I know," she said. "I need to understand the curse, to know why it lingers in you and what I must do." Kale motioned for her to sit, and for a long moment he seemed lost in thought, as if weighing whether to reveal the truths that could change everything. Then he spoke. "The curse began long before either of us were born. Centuries ago, I was betrayed by one I trusted. A spell was cast, not just on me, but on the land, on my bloodline, and on those who would come after. The wound left me crippled, yes, but it was also meant to break my spirit, to prevent me from reclaiming what was mine. I have endured it for centuries alone, until now." Alara listened, her pulse quickening. She felt the weight of his words settle over her like a shroud. She had known he carried pain, but not the depth of it, the centuries of solitude or the chains that bound him in ways the world could not see. "You are tied to this," he continued, eyes locking with hers. "Not by choice, but by blood. Your presence, your bloodline, awakens what the curse has hidden. You are not just here by accident, Alara. You are here because you were always meant to be part of this, whether you understand it or not." Her stomach twisted. Her stepmother's betrayal suddenly felt even darker, more deliberate. Alara had been sent not merely to survive, but to awaken a force that had been dormant for centuries. The realization both terrified and exhilarated her. I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale stepped closer, his gaze softening in a way he rarely allowed. "You are stronger than you believe, and perhaps that is why I am drawn to you." Alara's heart skipped, a warmth spreading through her chest she could not name. There was longing in his voice, yes, but also a warning. A pull toward him felt both inevitable and dangerous. The days that followed were filled with lessons and revelations. Kale taught her to focus her powers, to channel the energy of her bloodline into controlled bursts. She learned to read the runes etched into the floors of the castle, to sense the hum of the magic that lingered in its walls. And with each lesson, she felt herself drawing closer to him, though she struggled to admit it even to herself. One evening, Kale brought her to the library, a vast chamber lined with ancient tomes that smelled of parchment and shadow. Candles flickered in the dim light, casting long, dancing shapes across the walls. "There are truths here," he said, his voice quiet, "that even I have not fully understood. And if you are to help me, if you are to confront the curse, you must see them for yourself." Alara traced her fingers along the spines of the books, feeling the weight of centuries in her hands. She realized that knowledge itself was a kind of power, and that the curse had left clues, hidden, waiting for someone brave enough to find them. They sat together in silence, the only sound the soft rustle of pages and the occasional flicker of candlelight. And yet, in that quiet, the air between them seemed charged, as if the castle itself recognized the bond forming between them. "I am not like the others," Kale said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I have been alone for centuries. I do not trust easily, and I do not let anyone close, but I trust you." Alara looked up at him, startled. "Why?" "Because you are different," he replied. "You do not fear what you do not understand. You do not submit blindly, and you are not afraid to challenge me." Her cheeks warmed and she looked down, unsure how to respond. The truth of his words unsettled her in ways she had not expected. She wanted to resist the pull she felt toward him, yet every glance, every word made it impossible. The following night she dreamt of her stepsister, pale and weak, lying in a chamber filled with shadows. She reached out to her, but the shadows twisted and pulled her back. She woke with a start, the memory of the dream lingering like smoke. Cale was waiting outside her door as if he had sensed her unrest. "You dreamt of her," he said softly. "I felt it." Alara nodded. "She is in danger. The curse, it affects her too." He took her hand gently, a rare gesture that sent a jolt of energy through her. "Then we must act carefully. The curse is old, stronger than either of us alone, but together, perhaps we can change its course." Days passed in preparation. Alara and Cale moved through the castle, tracing the history of the curse, uncovering old scrolls and enchanted artifacts that hinted at its origin. They discovered that her stepsister's illness was linked to a hidden part of the spell, a fragment that had been ignored for centuries. One night, as they worked together in the candlelight, their hands brushed over a glowing rune. Sparks of energy leapt between them, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Cale's eyes softened, and for the first time Alara saw the vulnerability behind his commanding gaze. "Do you feel it?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she whispered. It reacts to us." Cale nodded, his expression unreadable. "It will take more than power to undo this. It will take trust and courage. Are you ready to risk everything?" Alara hesitated. She thought of her stepmother, of the betrayal that had sent her here. She thought of her stepsister, lying in shadow and sickness. And she thought of Cale, who had opened a world of mystery and danger she could not turn away from. I am," she said finally, her voice steady. Cale's eyes softened and he stepped closer, the air around them charged with unspoken tension. "Then we begin," he said. The ritual was set in the castle's highest tower, where moonlight spilled across the stones like liquid silver. Alara stood at the center of the circle, runes glowing faintly around her. Cale knelt beside her, guiding her hands, his voice steady as he chanted words older than memory. Energy swirled around them, the castle trembling in recognition. Shadows danced on the walls, and for a moment, Alara felt as if the entire world had narrowed to the space between her and Cale. And then she saw it, a vision, clear as day. She and Cale standing together, surrounded by flames that did not burn, yet purified all that lay in shadow. They were smiling, not in triumph but in understanding. Before she could comprehend it fully, the vision shattered. She gasped, blinking as the candlelight flickered wildly. The castle trembled, distant sounds echoing like warnings. Cale's hand remained on hers, steadying her. "The curse is stirring," he said quietly. "It reacts to your power and to our bond. You must be careful. Every step forward may bring danger, but also redemption." Alara's heart raced. She had glimpsed the possibility of saving her stepsister, of breaking the chains that bound Cale. Yet she knew the path would not be simple. It would demand courage, trust, and perhaps a willingness to embrace a power she did not fully understand. That night, she lay awake, thinking of Cale, of the curse, and of the bond forming between them. She realized that she had come to the castle as a victim, betrayed and frightened. But she was no longer powerless. She carried within her the spark that could change everything, and in doing so, she had also awakened feelings she did not fully understand, feelings that were both dangerous and undeniable. Outside, the castle stood silent, but the air hummed with anticipation. Somewhere in the shadows, the magic stirred, sensing the awakening of a force long dormant. And in the heart of the throne, Cale watched, knowing that the future, bright, dark, or uncertain, was already beginning to take shape around them both. The curse was rising. The bond was forming, and the next step would demand courage they had never known before. The night was heavy with mist, the kind that clung to the castle walls and wound through the towers like living fingers. Alara stood at the highest point of the castle, overlooking the dark forest that stretched endlessly beneath the silver glow of the moon. Her heart pounded, equal parts fear and determination, as Kale approached behind her, his presence both commanding and reassuring. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Alara nodded. "I am, but what if we fail?" Kale's eyes softened. "Then we face the consequences together, but I believe we will succeed. I believe in you." The ritual to break the curse had been prepared for days. Ancient runes, glowing faintly in the moonlight, formed a circle around them. Candles flickered in the wind, casting dancing shadows on the stone floor. Every element had been arranged with precision, every word and gesture rehearsed countless times in their minds. And yet, as the moment approached, Alara felt the weight of centuries pressing on her shoulders. They stepped into the circle together. Kale placed his hands lightly on hers, guiding the flow of energy between them. The magic responded immediately, swirling in vibrant patterns of silver and violet, coiling around them like serpents of light. "Focus," Kale said. "The curse is old. It will resist. It will test you both. Do not falter." Alara closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of the castle beneath her feet, the rhythm of Kale's heartbeat through his touch, and the strength of her own bloodline awakening. She took a deep breath and let the energy flow freely, letting it connect her to the magic of the castle, to the past that had bound Kale, and to the future they could forge together. Suddenly, the shadows around them stiffened, twisting into shapes that seemed almost human. The air grew colder and a low murmur echoed through the towers, a sound that was neither wind nor voice but something in between. The curse itself had awakened, sensing their intent. "Hold steady," Kale murmured. "Do not let fear control you." Alara gritted her teeth and channeled the energy, feeling the force of the curse push back against her. Images flashed in her mind. Her stepsister lying pale and weak in a distant chamber, her stepmother's calculating smile, Kale's pain, centuries of solitude and betrayal. The visions threatened to overwhelm her, but she focused on one truth, the bond they shared. That bond, fragile and new, was the key. Kale's voice rang in her ears. "Trust me, trust us." With a surge of determination, Alara let the energy flow fully through the circle, into Kale, into herself, and into the castle itself. The runes flared brightly, and a wave of light swept through the hall, scattering the shadowy forms that had emerged. The castle trembled as though it were alive, groaning and shifting, releasing the weight of centuries. And then, in the brightest flare of moonlight, the shadows shattered completely, dissolving into nothingness. The curse that had bound Kale's body and spirit for hundreds of years lifted, leaving him free for the first time in centuries. His leg, once crippled and bound by pain, straightened fully. He took a deep breath, feeling the strength return to his body and the burden finally lift from his soul. Alara staggered slightly, exhausted but exhilarated. She looked at Kale, and for the first time she saw him not as the distant, commanding king, but as a man vulnerable, alive, and whole. "We did it," she whispered, disbelief and joy mingling in her voice. Kale smiled, a rare and gentle expression that lit his face. "Yes, we did." Together, but their victory was not without cost. The ritual had drawn attention. From the shadows of the castle, figures emerged, ancient rivals who had long sought to see Kale fall, creatures bound to the curse, now weakened but still dangerous. They circled the tower, testing the boundaries of the light. Kale stepped in front of Alara, his presence protective yet commanding. "Stay close," he said. "We face them together or not at all." Alara nodded, her fear tempered by the confidence that had grown within her. She felt the strength of her bloodline, the power she had cultivated, and the bond that now tied her to Kale. They moved as one, weaving their energy, their magic, and their determination into a force that radiated through the courtyard. The challengers, sensing the combined power of Kale and Alara, faltered. Their attacks were weak against the light of the ritual's aftermath. One by one, they dissipated, shadows breaking apart in the brilliance. The castle, now free of the curse, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Kale turned to Alara, his eyes reflecting both exhaustion and awe. "You were incredible," he said softly. "I could not have done this without you." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had come to the castle as a pawn, betrayed and afraid, and now she stood as a partner, equal in strength and courage. And yet beneath the triumph, a question lingered, one that had been growing since the first day she had met Kale. "What now?" she asked quietly. "For me, for us?" Kale stepped closer, taking both her hands in his. "You have a choice," he said. "You can return to your old life, to the world you left behind. Or you can stay here with me and embrace the life you have helped create. A life where danger exists, yes, but also freedom, power, and love." Alara's breath caught. The words were simple, yet heavy with meaning. To stay would mean embracing the unknown, the immortal, the magical. To leave would mean returning to safety. But could she ever feel safe again, knowing what she had awakened? She looked into his eyes, seeing not only the king, but the man who had endured centuries of pain, the man who had opened his heart to her even before the curse was fully lifted. She felt the bond between them, the unspoken trust, and the spark of something deeper than either had expected. She began, faltering, her hands tightening around his. "I choose us." Kale's eyes softened, and a smile, gentle and full of relief, spread across his face. "Then stay," he whispered. "We will face everything together." The castle seemed to shimmer with approval, the walls reflecting the light of their combined magic. Somewhere in the towers, a faint hum of energy pulsed, as if the castle itself recognized the choice and celebrated the end of centuries of darkness. Alara and Kale stood together at the edge of the highest balcony, the wind carrying their hair and the scent of mist and pine. The world beyond the castle was vast and unknown, full of danger and possibility. But for the first time they were not afraid. They had each other, and they had conquered a force that had seemed impossible to defeat. "Do you feel it?" Kale asked, his voice low, almost reverent. Alara nodded, letting the warmth of his presence fill her. "Yes, freedom and hope," Kale smiled. "Then we begin a new chapter, not just for the castle or for the curse, but for us, together." The first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting golden light over the towers and the forest below. The mist began to lift, revealing the beauty of the land that had long been hidden by shadow. Birds stirred in the trees, their songs tentative but joyful, as if celebrating the new beginning. Alara felt the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. She had faced betrayal, fear, and a power she could not have imagined. She had awakened a curse, challenged it, and found not only strength but love. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what the future held, she and Kale would face it together, unafraid. Kale took her hand, and they looked out over the land, the castle, and the forest that stretched endlessly beneath the sky. The world was wide, full of mystery and danger, but also beauty and light. And for the first time in centuries, Kale did not feel alone. "Together," he said, his voice firm and certain. "Together," Alara echoed, her heart full. The castle hummed softly, as if in agreement, and the wind carried the promise of new beginnings. The curse was broken, the shadows had receded, and two souls bound by fate, courage, and love had claimed their future. And in that quiet, sacred moment, they both understood. No matter what storms might come, no matter what darkness awaited, they would face it as one. The curse was ended, the bond was sealed, and love, true, enduring, and unbreakable, had finally found its place in the heart of the castle.